Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to be the guest today. Before we hit this off and I introduce our host, here's a quote just for this podcast. I'm sorry, I'm about to read the quote, and above it is another one that I'm going to share because I just have to. But the one I was going to pick was, "It is impossible to suffer without making someone pay for it. Every complaint already contains revenge." The other quote above it, though, is, women, they make the highs higher and the lows more frequent." Friedrich Nietzsche, guys, today. Oh, these quotes, they're funny.
That's a really good one.
But the one I just our banters over the years, my host, Tony Capullo, founder of South Fork. If you haven't heard him on the podcast being interviewed, please start taking me seriously. And today he is our host. So thanks for listening. And thanks for coming on, Tony.
Jay, always a pleasure, my friend. I want to jump right into it because you and I have been working very closely together for the last couple of months, and it's been really fantastic. So I want to start off by having. I know there's a lot of things in the work for Culture Matters, your podcast, and some of the things you're doing. You're taking a really unique and clever approach to getting information to the subscribers and the listeners. Can you tell listeners some of the things that you're doing that they can expect to come up in the next 6 to 8 months?
Absolutely. And I'm always like thinking through, like, there's certain things I am as an individual and as someone that's been given opportunity to serve others, our customers, and an opportunity to lead our people. I am doing some things, and I'll share some of those things. And we, there's people that aren't heard on this show that are help make this show happen, a part of our team, that without them, this show isn't growing. I don't have the opportunity to talk to the listeners, with you, through you, to you. So our team, we've been saving all of these actual video of us even talking right now and everyone to get those on YouTube and the various media platforms. We already have leaned more deeply into the audio. So the listeners are going to be hearing 3 times a week being released on the Culture Matters podcast. And the intention is to continue increasing the volume without lowering the quality. Now, of course, right? Who wouldn't be interested in that at some level? But I believe we can pull it off, increase the volume without decreasing the quality. So one of the things that I have asked that, like, the individuals like yourself, Tony, and others in my life that support us with the Culture Matters podcast, is the opportunity to have special people, eccentric people, smart people, cultural people on the show, and more of them. So something I would say to our listeners would be, stay tuned, because as a consumer of podcast, there's nothing I disdain most outside of bad audio, which, hey, it happens, is when the podcast doesn't release episodes quickly enough or at enough speed for me to digest every morsel of episodes. So I've let the audience down, and I apologize in the past. And the vision is that we increase the amount of volume so that a rare few would even be able to consume all the value by keeping the value high.
Yeah, that's a great approach. But you're also I wouldn't say changing. You're modifying. You're throwing in some unique structures. Like, for example, you're going to do a round table, right? Can you talk about the round table type of structure?
This idea,
which is really exciting because that gets a lot of information from a lot of experts to the listeners in one podcast.
Yeah, I think it was a manifestation of our dialogues together, our open dialogue, our a reflection of our relationship, and which is, I think, exemplary of what Culture Matters is about, the relationships that can be curated through the values that we talk about, and the values that I try to represent on this show, even with strangers. Because at one time, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, Tony Capullo was a stranger to me. So the roundtable idea came from these dialogues, these interactions, and I think it was a epiphany because of what? Maybe you could help me out with this. What would it be like if we gathered some of these? Because I'll give a testament to your connect the dots mantra. If we gathered various subject matter experts and conversated in a way where it was inclusive, essentially, everybody had a voice, and that can be done with you involved. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think the evolution, how it's evolving, and the trajectory is really, a testament to your vision for what your organization is, what the podcast is, and your commitment to get valuable information to the people who subscribe to your podcast. In other words, you don't just take those people for granted. You really want them to get more in the way of value. And I think when you and I started first talking, I think it was the first podcast I did with you, and I realized just the quality, how well prepared you are, that you just don't, they just don't show up. There are people that do a podcast, they just go, well, they show up, they're not prepared, right? They don't ask good questions, and there's no value to the listener unless there's entertainment value.
Yeah.
And there's very little of that, right? Unless you listen to two celebrities joke. But your vision for this is phenomenal, and you pulled it off in a very fast timeline. Because I know from the conversations I've had with you, which there are many, your commitment to improvement and always looking for that other level, raising that bar, is uncanny.
Thank you. I that drives me to get up in the morning, to try to improve and break myself down, be critical of myself, judge myself, work on myself, improve. It's very loud. A thought came up when you were sharing that, was I made a decision to have guests come back to the show. It fills my heart. Mm-hmm. And I think this idea of having, let's say, for example, you, me, and Evan Rumbaugh just did a 3-way conversation. That was an experiment. I haven't done a lot of 3-way dialogues. I loved it. It was challenging because you want to include another person and make sure everyone's included. And the idea of having multiple people is scary in that sense of wanting it to be valuable for all guests and, of course, the audience. However, I think it's possible as well, because the culture of this podcast is to exemplify culture in the sense that guests are invited back. Even those I just met that first time. Hey, come back. Would you come back? There'll be more to talk about. I have more curiosities. It'll be enjoyable. And the feedback that I get from the guests is not over 90% of people have said, yeah, let's come back. And it's been a short enough time where I would say that other 10% that hasn't gotten back to me, I wouldn't even argue. I don't know if it's a no yet. It's likely I'm going to get a message back from many of them. Right. So this, I think part of it is wanting to develop relationships and for the audience to experience culture through the podcast as an unspoken message of what culture is. The Culture Matters podcast, in my view, is my culture, part of my life. The people on it are people that are in my life. Even those that I just meet, many of them become close, like yourself. I mean, we did meet in the real world. No, not on the television show. But so there's people that I've never known that come on the show that the listener can hear me building a relationship with for the very first time, and then continuing to have a relationship with. It's like some could commoditize that to sales, because I do have we have services, and there are products that Culture Matters provides. I don't see it that way at all. It's a culture. Because the C in collaboration is give first, intend to help, and get started today. The C in culture matters. I'm sorry. It's collaboration. Give first, intend to help, and get started today. It's been there. It's in the book. 30 Days of Thought is somewhere around here. It's funny. They get this library. Where's 30 Days of Thought? I think it's over there. But I have to show you the values on one of these shows we do. But the C is collaboration. Give first, intend to help, and get started today. So last night, for example, I had a coach on, 3 decades. They've been coaching people. And I said to them, if you want clients, go look at the roster and call them after you listen to the podcast. I think that there's not enough me's to go around. Call them. And I'm not for everyone. And listen, and I said a true story because I found it out 2 days ago. Paul Auster, who's been on this podcast, great credit CEO, founder, one of my good friends, supporter of Culture Matters, a salesperson in the mortgage, recruiter in the mortgage industry, listened to his podcast, reached out to him. I just found this out 3 years ago. They became like best friends. And they want to come on the show and talk about that. Now, this is going to release after that episode has come out. So, we're kind of, it's like we're living in the future right now. It's cool. But anyway, like that is to me so beautiful. And so, how like you make these relationships at events, just like you met Evan. I see the Culture Matters podcast as an event. Because my life is an event. The people I meet, it's an event. And the listeners, how they come in contact with these speakers can be an event for them. I see the stage. There is no stage in the sense that separating you and me is the host and the guest. I guess if anything, we're both on the stage and the audience is looking up and they're seeing their idealized self through our lived experiences. And, as Alicia said, there's an innocence and admiration for he may not realize one day he could be admired. I'm paraphrasing because it's way more poetic than that. But the listener can listen to these lessons and, be inspired, but they can also reach out to the guests and develop a relationship and maybe build friendship or hire them or be hired by them. It's, for me, a living, breathing event. And for that to happen, I must be prepared. Our team must feel respected and valued and be excited to release these episodes. And that's a bit of what's to come. More multi-conversations and with more and more dialogue with Tony and close compadres of the Culture Matters podcast. I'm sure we'll continue to innovate and come up with new ideas of how to help leverage this podcast as a medium to give the most value to our listeners as possible. The most value. So that's a little bit what's to come. More.
Can you talk about the structure of the roundtable and when we're going to possibly be doing that?
When is tough because that'll be dependent upon dialogue that's going to happen off this show with smart people.
I'm guessing 2024, early 2024.
Yeah. I mean,
the holidays will put people out, but can you talk about the roundtable? It's a great idea, and I think it's going to be so valuable to listeners to have all these people that want to be on your podcast all at one table.
Yeah, I mean, think of it like I was recently told this statistic by Phil Treadwell, who's been on the show, that the average person, shout out to Phil Treadwell, has a Business for Success podcast. I hope I'm saying the title right. And the Mortgage Marketing Minute, that I'm saying right. I've been on both of them. And he said the average person listens to 7 podcasts. if the Culture Matters podcast can be a portal for our listeners to listen to more podcasts that are high quality. So I'm thinking, as you say, connect the dots. You have 3-4 subject matter experts on a roundtable with yourself integrating. Each one of those individuals may or may not have a podcast. If I'm doing anything right, they end up having a podcast. And now our listeners can actually follow them and engage in their cultures and experience their character and experience their brand in the virtual world long term and consume their information. We become a hub for almost like a library. Of these people that come on the roundtables, they have books. They're experts in their craft. They're people that the audience has been able to experience through the show. Let's go, let's get even more. And maybe, they're meeting people. They're meeting other experts. Here's an example. From a, let's say, the old guard perspective at an event, each speaker is almost incentivized below self-awareness to make it about them. Even if they're a really good speaker and they don't make it just about them, structurally it's about them because it's them alone on the stage sharing information to the audience. When it's them with a group of people, it changes the dynamic. Because now it's not a keynote that could be contrived that's based on the same value proposition they're used to saying and saying and saying again. Who knows what's going to be asked about? Who knows what's going to be talked about? It lowers the power dynamic, increases the call to responsibility, I would argue. It's a more humble servant act. It's more inclusive to have a bunch of people on the same stage having dialogue. It's going to be a more natural, organic, creative experience to have multiple people sharing thoughts based on other thoughts openly. So there's new information that's going to come from it. New ideas are going to come from that type of medium. Not easy to pull off. That's a challenge. That's exciting. That's where value is created. So I think the old world model of consumers being okay with sitting in an audience and just listening to a speech, that's going to die. That's going to die over time.
Is it dying now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. An example of that would be the rise of the Gary V's and the Brad Lees and I'll use those two as a good example, the uncontrived speaker types that have, a gift of just thinking out loud and sharing how they feel. Huge interest in those types of speakers versus the Les Browns of the world, the Tracy's of the world, the people that came in with, that speech that they shared in the same state, in different, you go state by state, city by city, and you give that same speech because of the transparency and access to information. I'm not sitting in my chair listening to that thing. To me, I'm actually thinking it's inauthentic because it's been prepackaged. If I'm the generation Z, millennial generation and below, I want something that it's not gonna. I don't know what the person's gonna say. I'm craving. The speaker's in competition with the person looking at their phone.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
So I could be on my phone on TikTok in the auditorium, getting more value from my phone for free than listening to this speaker trying to sell me whatever the hell they're trying to sell me. I feel that they're trying to sell me because I can tell they're not present. They're just stuck in some trauma story. That's the old guard. That's dying.
You said a few minutes ago about the guests of the roundtable. You said some may have a podcast. If they don't, you hope that they will.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you add clarity to that? That's an interesting. I know one person that we want on your podcast who said he would is Ben Reinberg, and he does have one called I Own It. I think you've been on it. It's an amazing podcast.
Yeah,
he has amazing guests. and he's an amazing business person. I don't know how many of them have one, but go back to that theory. That's an interesting statement. Why would you say you hope that they have one? I think that's cool.
I think because how the podcast is done reveals the true character of the podcaster, the business. So for, let's say someone has a value proposition, they're an expert, subject matter expert. They have a value proposition that they present to the marketplace. How they actually behave on their podcast will reveal the congruence of their actions and their words.
I mean, a guy like, let's take Troy Korsgaard.
Yeah.
Because I'm a big fan of, as you know.
Yeah.
I can't see him doing a podcast because he's in a week, in 5 days, he's in 6 different places. I mean, if you look at any of his social media, he is on a plane just about every other day, right? And you know how hard it is to pin it down. But he's when you do, he's like enlightening. And by the way, I watch his videos on LinkedIn, and even though he's talking to insurance people, it's all relevant to business, and it's amazing.
Absolutely.
I love his videos. Most videos are okay. His are phenomenal. I just love it. And when he speaks with a passion, but I'm getting out of it. So what about a guy like that? Because if he had a podcast, he would be a hit.
I agree.
But I don't think he'll ever do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and he has the luxury of not having to pursue that when I know he's smart enough. He has his own plans. He has his own aims. He has his own desires. He is top of his field. And I'll give him all that. I have my own views of where I think any human that has people that already perceive them as valuable, that also has a what do you call it? Like a Rolodex or a cachet of quality experiences with other human beings, with other experts, with other people of value. That's going to increase the lifetime value of his customer, anyone's customer in theory, if they're in front of audiences, because those people are going to buy or maybe not buy yet. If they bought, now they listen to the show and he becomes a real staple in their life. Right. It helps hedge and then eventually buy more value creation ultimately, because the buy is an exchange of value. The money is less valuable than the outcome that the consumers perceive. So that the podcast is another part of the value chain of increasing the longevity of the customer based on actual value. Now, of course, the quality of it, this is my character piece coming in. The person to be a great podcaster, I would argue, we have to be great people. We do not have to be great people to be successful, though. So the podcast is a medium that makes us naked. If I give a speech and I've given that speech and it's based on my core competency, I'm less naked. And my suit is a reflection of that. But on the podcast, I'm naked. I have to think. I have to be present. I have to be. And I'm going to go against people potentially that have different views than me, that contradict me, that debate me. And I'm going to have to reveal my character, my values in those moments. How do I relate to these people? And it's raw. And now I could be, less transparent. I could edit everything out. I could delete episodes. I could unpublish episodes. That's all true. But I know if I did or not. So I think the podcast is a medium that can sharpen the axe or the whatever tool the subject matter expert uses to be that pundit, to be that inspiration for people, to be that hero for people. It helps them stay a hero, not just be a perceived hero, or once they were heroic and now they're just fat and happy. So because the thing about it's live, and it's not live, but it's more live than a stage alone. And that's not to negate the value of the stage or the utility of the stage. They're different mediums. They complement one another is my point. A podcast complements, and it's a living and breathing stage that lasts. For example, the 2 podcasts that I listen to, I've listened to all the episodes. And I'm waiting for the new episodes to come out. And then this new podcast I just discovered, I didn't realize that they had the podcast. One of my favorite interviewers, David Rubenstein. It's like, oh my God, there's 90 episodes on that. Oh my God, I can't wait to listen to 90. The other podcasts were Howard Marks's podcast, Oak Tree. I think it's Oak Tree Capital. I've listened to all those, and they don't release enough quickly enough, but that's fine. And the Columbia Business School Value Investor podcast, they haven't released so long. Abraham Lincoln said, I learn from everyone I meet. Usually it's what not to do. So that's what I would say, though. Those that don't have podcasts, they're just missing opportunity to connect more deeply with their audience, or potential audience. And it is a living and breathing organism that creates value. The data shows we all want to make our own decisions. We want to believe in free will, even if there isn't a thing. So I think it's a bit arrogant to not give our consumers the ability to choose, the ability to listen and decide. And so the customer's choosing every day to listen to us, and they're choosing to invest in us on their own accord. And if the future leaders are going to have the highest listening times, they're going to have engagement. They're going to. That's what I think, and I could be wrong.
Who was your first guest
On the Culture Matters podcast?
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I want to say it was like Jeb Blunt or Janine Driver's number 2.
Really, Janine?
She might have been number 2 on this medium. Now, before the Culture Matters podcast, there was in-person interviews. I would go with a camera, whether it was with myself or whether it was with an individual that was retained, and physically interview people. Like I went to Jerry Acuff's office years ago, Delta Point.
Did you?
Yeah, that's on YouTube. It's fun. It was a fun.
I'll have to see that.
What
year was that?
I used to do the in-person. I enjoy the in-person. The in-person became more, it was something I invested in to grow Culture Matters, give first, intend to help. Would go to people in positions of power and listen to them and uncover their genius so that other people could look at it like consumers, give them the content, and they would post it, they would share it. That helped the marketplace start to accept the thoughts, ideas, and opinions I had that I believed were so esoteric and in my opinion, high grade, hard to understand. So when I went around people that were already predisposed to being taken seriously, people started taking me more seriously. And then people, I started the access to the rooms that I would have to be in for the very niche specific type of consulting we do, to have access to those rooms as someone that wasn't bored on third base was difficult. So what helped me get there was to be around people that already had power and prestige, excuse me, and to essentially help them think live represents competence in an unspoken manner. So people in position of power said, this guy, we need this guy to help us. He's somebody we would want on our team. So you start getting what could be, minimized as leads, right? Opportunities to serve. And so I believe that all of that would be the case because of my understanding of culture. So I physically invested, and we as a team, went to these various experts and people in power to their offices, and I would interview them. We put that content out. As we grew as a firm, it's about leverage and having the show virtually. I'm not running around the country investing in that medium. Now we're running around the country already working with our client partners, growing these companies at scale, uber successful. So it worked. My business plan worked because I understand culture. Part of the reason it had to work was because I understand culture at such a deep level that it would go above a lot of people's heads. So the people that it didn't go above were people very, very, very tenured, very, very intelligent, and with a tremendous amount of responsibility. They could kind of see that I wasn't making things up. I just had a really deep understanding. That's how it unfolded for me as an advisor on culture, and for us as a firm. So it grew around that. But mirroring the value, give first, intend to help and get started today. There's a humility in service. There's especially a value in serving someone less than you in core competency, in talent, in character, and because it forces openness. So anyway,
that's very interesting. So 1 year from today, what's Culture Matters podcast going to look like? Will be the same? Will be.
I think from this recording, ideally we'll be having a few hundred more episodes out on top of the 185 as of this recording that have been released, and we will have had experimented with multiple guests repeat. There'll likely be some kind of physical experience. I don't want to foreshadow too big with that, but just more, and ideally a way for the audience to connect with us, and a communication channel in that way. So, but just more. I mean, the one thing I don't want to do is let down the audience by not releasing the volume that me as a consumer understands is important. And I also want to use this platform to help as many of our contemporaries as possible. I think I'm ahead of the curve on the podcasting theory. Like, because I have tried to, I don't think our culture's really caught up to what podcasting really means for human culture. At least as far as I've been able to study and find and listen and follow people. I haven't, but I think it's going to continue to grow and continue to be important to the human condition. And people that consider themselves experts in various industries, podcasting is a medium that reveals expertise, and not being fully bought into it is missing an opportunity. And so they're going to expect a heck of a lot more, and hopefully a lot of them, if they desire to be business owners, they start podcasts and they build their business around it. You can start a podcast tomorrow and build a business around it very quickly with the right.
Have you ever thought of, I know one of the questions I asked you in our previous interviews was, have you ever thought of training people on how to build a podcast? Have you ever thought of teaching people how to build a business around the podcast?
I think,
because most people do it the other way.
I think it's inevitable. Of course, the issue is, impulse control, I think, is one of the things that undermines business value. Because the founder types, especially, are creative. They're in the Adizes literature, they call it the arsonist. Every day, the arsonist comes in, and the employees think, "What's the next idea that's not going to be executed?" And it's a pathology. It's when the founder is going a little bit too right. There isn't that feedback loop with an operating consciousness to challenge every new idea. Luckily, I'm marrying into that operating consciousness to challenge every new idea.
Right.
So where I'm going with this is, I think it's inevitable that all of the intellectual property, after listening to 11,000 plus hours of Audible, reading close to 2,000 books, spending all my time in businesses, studying companies, working in the trenches, building multi-million-dollar companies into beyond the hundreds of millions, and all these things that, as a firm, that we do, it's inevitable that all the various IP will be consumable by the general public. But right now, I care most importantly about our client partners and serving them in the capacities that we do, because that's our livelihood, is service to those that have given us that opportunity. In time, I don't think good ideas, it's hard to destroy good ideas if you have good ideas. In the sense, it's like, if you're a worker and you put work on yourself and you put it out there, you could try to keep something small. It just will not stay small. So I could try to keep Culture Matters small. It's not going to stay small because I've dedicated my life to this, and so have other people around me. My future wife included. She'll be my wife by the time this goes out. My wife included. We've dedicated our lives to Culture Matters. So absolutely, everything that I have an opinion on can be productized, service-wise, all of that. However, at this stage, the answer is no. The listeners can continue to get this based on the value of their time while we continue to grow as a company. As we continue to attract talent to our firm, other people will help us do that. Create those people like yourself, Tony, create those services, those products, spread the message. But it's a damn good idea, my friend. And it's absolutely possible and valuable because you're listening to somebody that did it intentionally that way.
Gotcha.
So yes, absolutely. I have found this though, well, going wholesale, doing it with corporations. One of the ways that corporations win in this marketplace is integrating these types of things into their business development plan. And we've been very successful doing that. So, any company owner listening to this with 100+ employees and with an high eight-figure business, reach out to me. I'd love to see if you can put up with me for a week. Maybe we'd have a relationship. Maybe we could work together. But yeah, retail, selling it to retail, which will be like the consumers listening, the general public. That's to come eventually if we're going to grow as a business. Right now, wholesale, working with corporations, that's like cutting teeth, and in the best way possible. We're getting our hands dirty. We're growing. We're learning, and I think I have pride in that. I think there's, I really want to fight against that idea of the get rich quick and the passive anything. The get rich quick, people are attracted to that, are lost seeking counsel and getting it from the people preaching passive. The only thing they're passive about is their honesty. They're actively just lying to themselves and misguidingly taking other people's capital that are the product because they're unclear of their purpose and why they work and why they started working. Those are the types of people that I help for a living. Get clear on why they worked, what they do, how they do it, where they want to go. So they stop telling themselves these lies like passive and get rich quick. So I say all that to make this point. Culture Matters is not a new business. It's been in business almost about 9 years. 10 years from now, probably everything that you said is going to be reality from millions of people. Mm-hmm. But I believe in that adage, Gates. People overestimate what can be done in a year and underestimate what could be done in 10. Mm-hmm. We have a 100-year vision of this company. So absolutely, damn right, all that's coming out. And the more that I talk about this with people like yourself, honoring me with their ears and their minds, the faster it'll happen. Because I can't just write in my office on the wall, right, all day long. Right. So yeah, the vision's coming to life, and you and me right here today is it's the fruit, man. I'm honored that you'd want to listen and ask some of these questions, because now I get to share with the audience some of the things that we've been working on, and I'm excited about it. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I've enjoyed this episode immensely, as always. And I'm looking forward to, I know some of the guests you have coming on over the next couple months is going to be, and so I know who they are, and I know what your listeners are going to get. It's pretty exciting stuff, and stuff only you could pull off, my friend.
Thank you. And thank you. Well, pull off with the luxury of having known my dear friend, Tony Capullo, and I should probably repeat this. Women, they make the highs higher, the lows more frequent. And if you once you're in the inner circle, everyone that you get to meet Tony and hang out with me and us, that joke will be even more funny. So we'll bring you inside. We'll bring you in.
We will. And
We
I'm
love
sure I'll
women.
talk to you in the next 24 hours outside of this episode. But it's always a pleasure, my friend.